Welcome to I'll Have You Know, a podcast from Rice Business. This episode is part of our Flight Path series where guests share their career journeys, the stories of the Rice connections that got them where they are.
From high school principal to an education tech executive, Layne Crouch has spent decades leading schools, school district teams, and inspiring every student in her classroom. As AI is becoming more intertwined in every aspect of our lives, including education, Corey recognized an opportunity to use and integrate new innovation and making an impact on the next generation of leaders. We talk with her about how she pivoted from a pre-med track to teaching kindergarten to being a student herself at Rice Business. We also talk about her new role leveraging AI and building a more equitable future for all students. Welcome to I'll Have You Know. I'm Maya Pomroy, your host, and our guest today is Layne Crouch, professional MBA from the class of 2013. Welcome, Corey.
Thanks, Maya. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we're thrilled to have you. You know, it's been a hot minute since you've been in Houston and at Rice.
Yes.
You've been up to quite a bit, and I'm so looking forward to talking with you about your story and your career pivots and the real dynamic industry that you are currently in, which is on the forefront of everybody's mind. So you were a former high school English teacher, you were a principal, and now you are an educational tech executive. You are the Chief Program Officer at AI for Education, which is something that I am very much intertwined with because I have children and they use a lot of AI in school right now. So having this opportunity to talk with you about it, I think that a lot of parents and even those that are in the AI space are curious about your journey.
Great. Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk about all that. And now I'm really curious to know what you're seeing in your children and their experience with AI as they move through their education journeys.
Well, we'll get to that. But first, we're going to talk
about you.
We will. So you started out as a pre-med major at NYU.
That's true.
I mean, tell me, so from that to education, that's a shift.
Yeah, I was always proud to be a good student, and I'm a lifelong learner. That's really a thread that goes through my story. And I wanted, graduating from high school, I wanted to go to a fun, exciting, honestly, hard to get into school. And so when I was accepted to NYU, I was like, okay, great. Not going to think about anything else. And I'm going to go there pre-med, but also an English literature major because I've always loved reading and writing and literature. And when I was there, I had my chem lab on Wednesday mornings. I still remember that. I remember dragging myself to the chem lab and being surrounded by all these other students who were, of course, brilliant.
Yeah.
But very focused on everybody getting the highest grade, which I understood.
Gunners. Those are called gunners, right?
Yes. I'm still very much a recovering perfectionist. And I was, dragging myself to those classes, but I also had the opportunity to get a work-study job through, at the time it was called the America Reads program. And so what I did for work while at NYU is that I was a teacher's aide in the kindergarten classroom in the Lower East Side. My week started to really shift because I realized how much I enjoyed being in that classroom with the teacher and with the students. I'm pretty sure I worked more hours than I was supposed to.
Well, that means that you have a passion for it. When work isn't work, then that's passion.
Yeah, so I certainly realized I had some reflections and some moments. NYU is it was an expensive school 20 years ago. It's still an expensive school. And I realized, maybe in pursuing education is more where my passion is. And so that took me to be actually transferring to Rowan University here in New Jersey and becoming an elementary education and English literature major.
Wow, so it was just that opportunity, that job that you didn't think was going to shift anything and really just completely transformed your future.
It really did.
It's those unexpected moments, huh?
Well, yes, very, very unexpected, but Then, I was like, New York City. I love New York City. I'm a city girl. I was an elementary education major, was getting ready to graduate, and some other friends had talked about the Teach for America program, which wasn't
Yes.
really very big at the school that I had transferred to, Rowan University. But I was like, the mission speaks to me. Let me go ahead and apply.
Could you tell us a bit about, because I know what it is, but for the listeners that don't, could you tell us about Teach for
Yes.
America?
Teach for America is a teaching core where at the time it was really targeted toward those graduating from college, and you applied to be a part of a core that would go to an area that really need teaching talent for at least 2 years and become a part. And then you would do training, and the idea of it is like serve the population, with a teaching talent, but also understand education. And then if you go off to other careers and other industries, bringing that knowledge in order to continue to advocate for some of the changes that we saw that we needed at the time and still need now. Well, the funny thing, Maya, is I was elementary, so sure I was going to New York City. I get my placement, and it said high school English in Houston, Texas. I'd never been to Texas, didn't know anything about Houston. And I actually called the Teach for America team and told them that I thought that they had made a mistake. I was like, I think you made a mistake. I'm supposed to be in elementary in New York City. And they were like,
And now I'm in high school in Texas, Houston?
they were like, no, you're qualified to teach. And you said you would be willing to go to Houston, which I think I said I would be willing to go to
anywhere,
city.
yeah.
But that was at the next big pivot. But really, I see it as, such a serendipitous blessing, because being, fresh out of college, and I went to teach high school English in Houston, and I was like, well, I have no idea what to expect. At the time, it was Sam Houston High School in the north side of Houston. I think it is now, the name has changed. But yeah, Houston is such a great city, as to be a young professional in and to start your career, let alone having the opportunity to be a part of the thriving, innovative education landscape there. I really think that it helped me think much bigger about what it meant to be in education and what was possible with innovation, and really moving the needle toward equity and supporting communities that historically, weren't being serviced in the way that they deserved.
Right. So how many years were you in Houston teaching high school English?
So I taught high school English first I taught for 2 years, and then I actually joined the Teach for America team for a few years in Houston and trained pre-service teachers in that role for several years. And then I went back into the classroom with a Houston-based charter network called Yes Prep. So if our listeners are in Houston, they probably know Yes Prep. And went back to the classroom and was both doing instructional coaching and teaching for several more years, until I became the school principal when we opened the high school.
Wow. You're a very young principal.
Maya. I was like, this is going to come up. I stepped into that role while I was in the MBAP program at the same time.
Well, wow, that's a lot on your plate. So wait, let's back up a little bit. So you're teaching in HISD and Yes Prep. And then, so what was the catalyst? What made you decide, you know what, I'm going to go get an MBA at Rice?
Yeah, so I had shifted from, HISD to Teach for America and then back to Yes. And I realize now and more as I was going, I always had a really entrepreneurial spirit. Like even in my first year of teaching, I was a baby, 22-year-old teacher. I still chuckle at myself. And I pitched like a new summer program for credit recovery for the high school students at my school. And my principal at the time let me do it, which is also
well, that's
funny,
great to have somebody that believes in you and gives you the agency to do things like that. That says a lot about their faith and trust in you,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So and I've had so many incredible supports along the way. But I realized that in every role I was in, I was always coming up with really entrepreneurship, right? Coming up with new programs, new design to solve for problems or opportunities that I was seeing in the work that I was doing.
What were some of the problems that you saw? I'm curious. Like, what were some of the programs that you started?
Well, for example, when I was at Yes Prep, which was in the Gulfton neighborhood, shout out to my Force family, we were the Gulfton Force. As a school leader, I brought in-house the local clinic called Legacy, where they provided mental and behavioral health services as well as, physical health services, and created a space on our campus to have a mental health specialist and then also a nurse practitioner. And so we started a partnership with Legacy so that my students, if something was going on with them or they needed extra support that, our school counselors weren't equipped to give that regular clinical support, they could just come, from their study hall or have an appointment once a week with somebody in-house. So it supported, their parents didn't have to necessarily take them to separate appointments. And it
Wow.
just kept a lot more of our students on campus with us and really took a whole child approach to.
Yeah, and so much efficiency, and you were so ahead of your time.
Yeah, well, and while I'm doing all that, I was like, "Oh, I heard about this Rice Educational Entrepreneurship Program. Maybe I should apply to that
Why
too,
not?
because why not?" But I think that, I started to recognize how I always think about impact. And I loved teaching, and I still, my colleagues will tell you every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I should just go back to teaching high school English because I love it so, so much. But I was always seeing the opportunity for impact, opportunity to help others shape and navigate toward, especially for our students, a future that felt where they had agency, and then that was where they could fill their own potential and be fulfilled. So, as much as I loved being in the classroom, it was hard. And it's also when you have 1,000 students and 100 staff members, and you're very community oriented and community based, which I believe in deeply, especially that change should come from the community. It's hard to feel like you want to meet the needs and the desires of 1,100 people through, only 24 hours in a day. So that work was rewarding, but very difficult. But still, I always saw the opportunity for impact and seeing what structures in education still serve us being the collective community, and what structures aren't serving us, and how can we continue to evolve and, innovate and grow so that we're doing better by more students. And so I always had the next thing in mind as we were going.
So tell me about the RICE program, because it was something that obviously drew you in, and juggling and managing a pretty rigorous career with school. That's a challenge. So tell me about your time at RICE.
To say the least. It was a time in my life when I remember thinking, like, if I can do this, I can do anything.
Uh-huh.
Because it was my first year at Rice when I was like the assistant school director first for 6 months. And then some things had changed in our organization where I became fully, the way that my brain interpreted it was by myself. Principal, we called it a school director at the time. And I remember feeling a shift, like during the day at work, I was the person that was really the way I think of it, taking care of my school and my community and my employees and trying to make sure that we're making the most of the time, talent and money that we have available to us to serve the students and their families in the community. And I was so thankful for the nights. This might sound weird to some people, for the nights that I had class, because I knew it was like, nope, 4:30, have to be in
Unplug.
the car. Yes, unplug the school director, Corey, and I get to put on my learner and my student hat. And I'm a learner at heart and a student, and I felt like as intellectually as rigorous as being in class was, it was still the time during my week where I got to sit back
Yeah.
and learn. And in some ways, like have somebody take care of me, like have somebody take care of, how I'm spending this time versus me having to be the one that's always shaping that for others. But the hours were long. The coursework is certainly,
Rigorous.
yes, it's very rigorous. And so it was certainly an intense couple of years, but it was an interesting way to balance my ebb and flow of the week such that I think it was sustainable for me. But
Well, it was so you were sitting in class, and then you would go and see your students sitting in class, right? Like
Mhm.
that's like living sort of parallel lives to those that you were serving.
Yes. I was also honored to have one of my staff member that was also in the MBA program. It just worked out that way.
Huh.
And so at graduation, we bussed some of our students to be
Oh,
there at graduation and for them to see the work that we had done and everything. But my graduation photo, I will forever cherish. I am smiling so bright because it was a whole section up in the
of your
auditorium
kids.
of my students going
Yeah.
nuts when they called my name.
Oh, I love that.
And it felt, as tough as that was, it felt very much that it was something we had done together as a community and that it meant something for them too.
And their support of you for
Yeah.
what you have accomplished, is sort of giving back to you the way that you were always and continue to always give back to them. That's an incredibly special moment. So after graduation, how did you get into the ed tech space?
I remember really thinking that I deeply believed, and we saw the evidence of it, that we were helping and supporting students in beating the odds, if you will, and all of our students were accepted to a
I
4-year.
read that 100% got accepted to 4-year college.
Right.
That's huge.
Which in that, in the Gulfton neighborhood at the time, that far outpaced the
Yes.
average. So that was deeply important to me, but I knew we were helping them beat the odds, but we weren't changing the odds. And I remember just kept thinking to myself, there's got to be a different way to have an impact on the way the system works so that like we change the odds, more students have access to an educational experience that gives them the option to go 4-year college or university if they want it, or gives them the option to take another post-secondary pathway if they want it. And then life things were going on as well as they do that was requiring me to move away from Houston. And so I had some colleagues that had actually started to work with a program called Summit Learning out of Summit Public Schools in California. And what I saw was that it was a program that was asking this question of what should school design look like and what should a school model look like based on what we know about learning and the learning science and best practices that's rooted in the community. And then how can technology support and make that
And be
happen in a way
leveraged.
that,
Yeah.
right, that was like never possible before. And I was like, yes, that is the type of thing that we should be exploring and pushing and really asking that question. Not just, how great can technology be or how far can it take us? Yes, that's something for society collectively. But this question of how do we really service the outcomes of all students and really keep the vision for a school and a school design in mind and use technology as a tool to help us achieve that in, quite frankly, like a system that's still pretty archaic. Like a lot of
Exactly.
the constraints in education,
Based on districts and
yeah,
states and, so many
districts
different
and
variables.
so many different variables. So that took me to being a part of Summit Learning that we eventually spun off to become our own nonprofit, which is now called Gradient Learning. And that was really my entryway into the EdTech space.
So this was a time, because I remember this was a time when AI was just starting to become, relevant. And for me, I feel like it was during that COVID time that it really started, for our family anyway, just started to gain a whole lot of traction when, the kids started going back into the classroom when classrooms were open again. And all of a sudden, you've got like Flint AI and all of these different platforms that kids could use, and even, obviously Chat GPT and everything else. And now it's really ingrained in everything. It's ingrained in every curriculum, it seems like, and in every teacher's learning plan and all that. For me, it sort of seems like it happened overnight. For you, it
Mm.
doesn't.
Yeah, yes and no, Maya. So ChatGPT was released to the public in November of 2022. It was the fastest growing, consumer technology that we've ever seen before. And interestingly, it grew in November 2022, grew a ton during that next spring, and then took a dip. The users took a dip in May and June. At first, those in the tech were like, oh, okay, is it cooling off this quickly? But we in education know what happened. That's when school let out. That's when school
Ah.
let out. And even recently, OpenAI released something. But what we saw very quickly is that students and teachers, even before all of the other EdTech layer products, we call them. So those are products like you mentioned, Flint and Magic School and School AI, those types of products. Their user interface is built on top of the frontier models like ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude. But even before startups were launching those products, students and teachers were using ChatGPT in teaching and learning. And so it was kind of all of a sudden. But at the same time, it's interesting to hear you say that it's pretty integrated because it is highly used, especially amongst students. But the work that we're doing, what we're seeing is that by and large, especially in K-12 education, understanding how to integrate it responsibly in a way that really supports the learning and the development of students and prepares them for a future where the technology is going to be in everything that they do. And supporting teachers that are trying to build the bridge from, well, pre-November 2022, this is how I would assess my students. This is what my curriculum looked like. And now all of a sudden they have this technology in their pockets, really, that is like a magic essay button, for all intents and purposes. What does that mean for how we need to evolve our practice? And that's a lot for teachers and school leaders and district leaders to think about while they're still running schools at the same
Right.
time.
Well, that's what I was
Yeah,
gonna ask, was that, I'm sure that you've got a really good lens on how teachers are responding to it, because I think that for some teachers, it's literally like walking on Mars. It's like, I don't really know how I'm supposed to do this, and this is not what teachers that have been teaching for decades, then all of a sudden
right.
it's like, well, here's this wonderful tool, and you need to learn how to use it because this is the future. So how do you manage that?
Well, the thing that we saw early on is that, and of course, with any innovation, you have the innovation curve. So you have your very early
Adopters.
adopters and et cetera, et cetera. So there's some teachers and some leaders that have been at the forefront of this for almost 2 years now. But overwhelmingly, a lot of practitioners, so the teachers and the leaders, their first encounter with it was realizing that students were using it to do their work in ways that weren't aligned with academic integrity. And
yes,
so
I was going to bring that up too.
AI as a cheating tool is a narrative that we really have to address head on and
Yes.
then work to shift it. And the students tell me too. I have the privilege and honor of, doing focus groups with high school students in particular. I was a ninth grade English teacher, I
You
know
know
how
what's going
to
on.
get them to warm up and tell me what's really going on. But they'll tell me how they cheat and like how not to get caught using it. And sometimes it's like, well, my friend did this. And I'm like, okay, your friend. So for teachers and as a former, English teacher, my
You
heart
get it.
goes out. I totally get it because you're already working so hard and now you have to assess your students completely differently. And they can't actually write a good essay with ChatGPT unless they know the content really, really well and have strong evaluation skills. So we have to, meet teachers where they are and then give them the space to be learners and explorers themselves, to build their capacity with the technology. And as educators, we naturally think like, this is what makes sense for my students, or we have to, as a team, talk about how we're going to evolve our academic integrity policy and how we're going to evolve our assessment practices while still recognizing, students have to take standardized tests. They're
Yeah.
still going to have to write essays sometimes, but how do we, continue to think bigger about the skills and the mindsets really that they need to be successful with the technology?
Well, so that's one of the things is that for my kids, when they use AI in school, it's not give me the answer to this question, which
Right.
is, the academic integrity issue, but more of give me 5 problems about this geometry concept, right? So then it generates these problems and then you can, have more practice and figure out what you're getting right and what you're getting wrong and those sorts of things. So it took my husband and I a little while. I'm like, wait a second, I don't understand why you're using AI. Like, I don't. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, well, and then when we sort of dug a little bit deeper, and the teachers were able to explain, this is about giving your child more access to more opportunities, to more practice, to build their skill set, and that's part of it as well. So then I was like, oh, okay. So because it was very hard for me to wrap my brain around how you can use ChatGPT, which immediately you think is cheating
Yeah.
to actually, but I mean it's sort of the same way that Google was at the beginning, right? Like you type in whatever you want on Google and there's a bazillion things that'll give you all the answers.
Mm-hmm. And calculators in the 70s.
Right. That's a very good analogy.
I was not in high school math in the 70s,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
based on my research, that it follows a similar curve.
So those are some of those misconceptions about AI. What do you think is the biggest misconception about AI in schools?
That it's about the tooling and the technology. It's not. We feel very strongly about this, that it's about building AI literacy. It's about, yes, understanding at a very basic level, what the technology is, how it's developed, so that you can understand the capabilities and the limitations of it. And then what we really focus on is both for educators and leaders as well for students, learning how to use the technology safely, ethically, and effectively. So it's not just about, how do I ask a question or get information in ChatGPT or Notebook LM or whatever tool you're using, but it's understanding the potential risks and how to keep yourself and how to keep others safe, which is data privacy and security. But it's also understanding that it's important to have a balance of human relationships and AI relationships, because we're getting more and more opportunity to have AI companions to support us in those things.
So tell me some of the work that you do, because AI for education is really tackling this is one of the biggest shifts in modern learning,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, yes, calculators in the 70s, and this is another big modern shift, and computers and all of those other things. So tell me about AI for education and how you're really promoting this remarkable shift in learning and really giving all students the access, that equitable piece, because there's some kids
Right.
that don't have phones and don't have access to these sorts of AI technologies.
That's why we focus on the AI literacy piece. And we understand, because also my change management background and understanding systems, that we need to give the time and space and resources for leaders to build their AI literacy, for teachers to build their AI literacy, for parents and caregivers to do it as well, and for students. And so we work with them to do exactly that, explore the tools and understand what that means for them in their immediate work, and then think bigger about redesign or evolving a school program. So we provide workshops. And the thing that we do as well is that we're tool agnostic. We do have
Okay.
opinions about tools and where, what's safe and what's fit for purpose and what we think isn't quite yet and how to integrate it in that way. Because the technology is going to continue to evolve. But we really believe a foundation of which is rooted in durable skills, right? Of critical thinking and evaluation and understanding the best tool for a job and how to be community oriented. That is the work that we do. And of course, we teach people how to use the tools and drive towards outcome with them while we're laying that foundation as well.
Hmm. So what kind of skills do students really need in an AI driven world?
Oh, the $1,000,000 question that everybody wished they knew the answer to.
Well, I have a feeling you've got some suggestions and thoughts on the issue.
Well, to bring it back, I really believe that students need entrepreneurial skills, and not necessarily because every student is going to go off and start their own business per se, but at the root of it, entrepreneurial skills is about, understanding what you're trying to drive to or what's the job to be done, seeing what's the diagnosis, what are the challenges or, opportunities to do better, and then understanding the resources that you have and moving forward with strategy as if it's a puzzle piece. And it's strategy, but it's also about just seeing that opportunity and having the confidence and the belief in your own critical thinking, your own resourcefulness, in your ability to collaborate and build relationship with others in order to solve a problem or drive something forward. And the reason why I say those entrepreneurial skills, many reasons, but also, I mean, next week I'm working with a group of pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 teachers. Their students are going to be graduating high school in 2039 and then doing post-secondary. They're going into a workforce that we have no idea what it's going to look like. But what we do know is that as things evolve, their ability to see opportunity and believe that they can, drive toward that and that they can learn and adjust and use the tools available to them to get to that end point. That's going to be the thing that allows them to continuously have agency over the path that they take.
So, the time that you've been at this remarkable organization, what sort of feedback have you gotten? Because you said that you do workshops with teachers and, so what kind of feedback do you usually get? Or, I mean, people know that the train has left the station and either you like get on a raft and get out to the train or you've missed the train. Not a
Yeah.
raft, on a scooter.
We work really hard to be pragmatic. We're both not overly optimistic about where the technology is headed, but we're not pessimists either. We are pragmatic. We say, look, it's here and it is a change. Let us meet you where you are to build some valuable skills. So while I believe school and classrooms need to evolve pretty drastically to continue to make sure our young people have agency in the workforce of the future, there's also just tools and resources we can give teachers that are going to help them in their practice in the immediate. We just need 90 minutes with them. It doesn't matter if they've never touched ChatGPT before. They can walk out with some practical tools that is then going to go and enhance their practice moving forward. And that's the feedback we get. People always come in a little, well, not everybody comes in hesitant, but for those that come in hesitant, or for those that are like, I'm a first grade teacher, this doesn't apply to me, we're able to demystify it and open their eyes to possibility and the reality of why it's complicated for them as current teachers to integrate this in a responsible way.
So, what are you the most hopeful of and looking forward to in education in the next, 5 years because of AI?
Well, I'll say two things. For young people, and you'll notice I refer to students as young people often, they are so brilliant and so motivated, to solve for the things that are impacting their communities and their lives that we've already really seen how access to these tools can help them be even more self-directed in having an impact. We do something called a promptathon where groups of high schoolers come together over the course of a day and solve for a problem in their community. And they use AI to help do the research, help put together their pitches, all of those things. So I'm just excited to see when we get it right, to see the brilliance of young people unlocked, because I have so much faith that they're going to help us have a more abundant future with this technology. And then the other thing I would say that I'm excited about is that I get to do this work with the educators on the ground day to day. And sometimes when you're in product development, and eventually as we grow, this might not always be the case, but I'm really basking in it right now. Because there were times, in previous years where I didn't get as much on the ground time with educators that are working with students day to day, and they're just trying to continue to get better at what they do too. And so while I bounce around the country quite a bit, it is just such a privilege to be able to sit with them in their schools and in their spaces and see what they're really trying out and how I can have a positive impact on what they're doing.
Well, it seems like your entire career has been a very positive impact from the very beginning. And I'm sure you would have been a wonderful doctor, but I think that I'm very grateful that you ended up in this industry and in this space, because it's a brave new world. And
Thank you.
here we are, and you really get to be on the forefront of all of that. And I'm really grateful that you took some time to talk to us about this, and so much that you have done since your MBA at Rice. And there's a lot of wonderful AI happenings at Rice. So if you ever make it back to Houston, you should come and check out Rice Business, because it's really been transformative in the last couple of years for even, us older people that get our MBAs.
Yes, I know. I am way overdue to be back. So I have to keep an eye on those events, and maybe I can, make it the good excuse to get back in Houston for a little while.
Yeah. Well, it's been a pleasure, Corey. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated the space to talk about this important work.
Thanks for listening. This has been I'll Have You Know, a production of Rice Business. You can find more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe and leave a rating wherever you find your favorite podcasts. We'd love to hear what you think. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Maya Pomroy, and Brian Jackson.